on the webinar. Please know you're going to have to approve. See, it just popped up. My student worker, Rita, who is helping us with the technical side of things, are going to announce a few things before we begin. Rita, and then I'll be right back.
So you'll be able to ask your question live to Josh and Kathy. So once you submit to the Q&A box, make sure you stay by your computer, because in order for us to bring you to a temporary panelist to ask your question, you have to approve and click OK. So just stay alert so that the process can be efficient. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rita. We just want to make sure we get everyone's questions in. Our speakers today are Cathy Yuspa and Josh Goldsmith. They're successful USC alumni, prolific writers and producers. They received their MFAs from the film school at SCA, and are undergraduates. They attended University of Pennsylvania, Josh, and Stanford University, Cathy. We have very smart people on our hands right now. They're a husband and wife duo. They've written multiple classic films, such as 13 Going on 30, What Women Want. They've recently written screenplays for Warner Brothers and DreamWorks Animation. They've also are adapting 13 Going on 30 into a Broadway musical. On the TV side, they've served as showrunners and executive producers of the long-running comedy King of Queens that was on CBS. They've also composed the theme song for the show. They have written and produced many TV pilots for all of the big networks, and they've created and executive produced Big Day, as well as the Fox comedy Till Death, for which Josh directed several episodes. They've also written several network series, including The Goldbergs for ABC. That is so impressive. I'm super impressed, and I'm reading this. They're currently the co-creators and showrunners of the streaming series reboot of the Mighty Ducks movie franchise on Disney Plus, starring Emilio Estevez and Lauren Graham. Thank you so much, Cathy and Josh, for being here. We are so grateful for your time, and we are going to jump right into our questions and answers. And
thank you so much for having us, and we are proud USC Film School alums. Had a fantastic experience there, and are excited to try to help in any way we can.
Yes, teamed up there, in fact, a little bit before, but really started working together at USC as well.
I'm assuming you guys met in school.
We met right before.
We did not.
Right before.
Yeah, we met in New York City, where we were both taking a year between college and grad school. And I had gone to college with Cathy's high school friends, and we met like New Year's Eve, the year before grad school, and both hit it off and both had applied to SC Film School. I was actually in the Peter Stark producing program. Cathy was in production. And yeah, and then while we were at school, we were married. Also, we started dating.
I think we were waiting on, when we met, we were both waiting on our applications.
Yes.
So we didn't know what was going to happen.
But our project, our thesis project that we wrote in school was the thing that got us an agent and the first script we sold, and it never got made. But USC really, really helped us. All the internships and all of the connections and all of the people we met in our classes who we are still friends with this day really, really helped us along our way.
That is such a cool story. That is really such a cool story. Okay, we're gonna jump into questions. I see one. Guys, start throwing them in, please, because we want to make sure we answer all of your questions. Let's start with Nate. Let's get Nate up here. Hey.
Hello.
Hi, Nate.
Nate.
Yeah.
Here. There you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this.
Still can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Oh, I can hear.
I can hear. We can hear.
I can.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll ask his questions. I'll ask the question because we can't hear you. What are some qualities that stick out to you in sample scripts and ultimately help get a writer staffed? Alternatively, what are some amateur mistakes that you notice in scripts that inhibit hiring?
That's a great
That's
question.
a really good question.
Great question.
Thank you.
I mean, when we were starting out, it was spec scripts for existing shows, and so in that way you could kind of tell if a person was capturing the voice of the show. I feel like it's what we read now are originals for the most part, and so that is like whether somebody has like an interesting kind of fun idea that they execute well, that the story pays off well, that the characters, I mean, all the typical things that you would think of. I think for me, like just, natural sounding dialogue, really grammatically correct. Like sometimes you just read scripts that have grammatical errors and it's really just like, that's not
it's
good.
real basic stuff for me. It's like stories that make sense. And I know that sounds obvious, but a lot of times you get specs where it's unclear. Someone has a lot of ideas and maybe a lot of creativity, but not a lot of know-how in terms of structure. And so I kind of feel like if a story's making sense, if the writing feels natural and easy, and when there are jokes, they don't feel forced, but they're funny and drawn from character. This is just our taste. I think every show might look for something different, but in terms of writing for comedy and the kind of comedy that we like and we like to write, we always just look for great characters and easy dialogue and stories that make sense. And, in terms of pilots that we read, there's always really, sometimes there's just a really interesting world that someone has put forth that I haven't seen before. And scripts all tend to blend together. Sometimes when we were, long time ago, when we were writing specs, everybody was writing a spec Friends. So it was like, you couldn't write a spec Friends, but that was a long time ago. But now I just feel like, if you have a singular idea that feels unique and original in a world that is, that just has a comedic premise and that can lead to funny things happening, you're going to be noticed. And I do say this a lot, and I don't know how it comes off to people like you guys, but I will say that most of the scripts you get are not that good. It seems like an impossible thing to break in, to get your script read and to have it cut through. But if your script is 75% really good, it's going to get noticed and it's going to get you somewhere. So don't be intimidated, I would say, by all of the things that tell you about the amount of scripts a showrunner gets and all of that stuff. It is hard to get through, especially in this agentless world, which is very confusing now. And we had to staff a whole different way on our latest show than just getting tons of scripts from agents. But your good script, and you guys are USC grads. I know you're all talented. Your good scripts are gonna be great calling cards for you. Don't lose faith. And I'm trying to think of the amateur mistakes that people make. I mean, sometimes people will put things in all different places. Like, I think for us, just a basic, don't hold yourself back, don't censor yourself too much, but a basic sense that you can't have a million locations and a million different places that a show goes. Like that goes a long way for us to make people feel like, they know the basic rules that, there's realities to production. And so when you read scripts that make sense, usually they have a few core locations where a show lives and great characters. I mean, that's also something that I feel like we always look for. We learned early on in our writing careers that creating, especially for TV, a lot of networks say we want that character that cuts through, that one singular voice that is that big character that cuts through. And a lot of that has to do with good writing to create a character with a strong attitude. But in fact, a lot of that has to do with actors. And it's something that you learn.
Oh, well, this is probably a slightly different point.
I will say this in terms of what cuts through in a spec script when I'm talking about like a great main character that has a very strong attitude, that is not politically correct, or that is, that cuts, something that is, wow, I'm reading something that I haven't read before. I think that we heard a great, this is a great story. Has anybody here seen the movie Bull Durham? It's an older movie for you guys, but if you haven't seen it, it's a baseball movie. It's written by and directed by a guy named Ron Shelton. And go watch it. It's a terrific sports movie if you haven't seen it. But one of the most famous moments in that movie is Kevin Costner is the lead, and he delivers this long monologue about what I believe. He's like, I believe in the hanging curveball. I believe it gets dirty. It's about women. It's about sports. It's a great speech. And we actually saw that movie at a second run movie house near where we live. And Ron Shelton was speaking, and somebody asked the question of him, did you write that speech because that's what you believe? Is that coming from your belief system? Is that why it's such a good speech? And he said, I wrote that speech for a movie star and it worked.
To get a movie star.
To get a movie star, yeah. And it worked. And that was a really good lesson. It applies to all of the shows we've done. It applies to What Women Want. We created a character that we hoped an actor would want to play. 30 Going 30 the same way, to create a female character that we hadn't really seen before. Creating that character that an actor wants to play. Actors like big speeches. Actors like to talk. So give your main character a big point of view, and that is something that if you think about it, a lot of great shows and great movies have in common.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thank
Nate.
you so much. Yeah.
Great to see you.
I absolutely
We-
love Goldbergs. It's a phenomenal show.
Thank you.
We have Cameron up next. How are you, Cameron?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Hello.
Hey, Cameron.
I lost my little screen that had the specific wording of the question, but I think I remember it well enough. First of all, yeah, thank you for coming and speaking and giving advice, Cathy and Josh. My question is, I guess, what are tangible first steps one in our position can take to getting into a writer's room as a writer's assistant, or getting your stuff seen, especially right now in an agentless world?
Right. Well, I would say that like the advice that was given to us in the beginning is getting any job in entertainment as opposed to maybe like another survival job is a good thing, because even though you might have long hours if you're working on a show as a PA or a writer's assistant or that type of thing, and it might make it a little harder to find time for your own work, it's like invaluable to try to make those kind of contacts, because in our experience, most like TV writers are pretty nice and want to help people coming along. And so if you can kind of get in that environment, then you can, with a little time and trust, you can pass your stuff to them. And that's probably the best path to getting an agent, through friends recommending you. And in terms of finding those jobs, I think, for us, like, we really had a direct path from USC to getting our first internship. Like, Josh was in the Stark program and he got an internship over a summer, and those people, he was just kind of reading scripts and doing that kind of stuff in the office, but they ended up helping us get our first agent, and helping us sell this first script. And then did the Daniel Stern internship come out of that, or? It was
a direct line between my USC internship to my job. I worked as an assistant to an actor named Danny Stern, who's a great actor. You probably know him from Home Alone. He was one of the bad guys, but Joe Pesci and Danny Stern. But he's been in multiple wonderful movies and has directed some movies. And I was his assistant right out of school. And we gave him our first screenplay that we wrote at USC, and he fought for it when he had a deal at Fox and got it bought. And that led to
a very
direct
path from like that, going from US. So I would say like the USC internships have a lot of value.
But I would say, just in terms of a part of your question is, how do you get a writer's assistant job? Because those obviously seem like the best jobs to get in terms of, the next step to getting a script and then maybe getting yourself a staff writing gig. Every writer's assistant we've hired they've always been, as Cathy said, recommended to us by someone we know working in the business. Honestly, our assistant now was our agent's assistant. And even though, our agent's no longer our agent, we still talk, and it's still friendly. And this guy wanted to make the jump from being an agent's assistant to, getting involved in production and seeing how it works in the nitty gritty. And we met him and we loved him because, you just trust people you know. And so I do think getting in the door, it is lucky. You got to get lucky and know somebody to have. But I do think, instead of saying I'm going to wait tables so I can, suffer and write, get in the business somehow.
Like
get in the business.
Even if it's not exactly if it's an agency because they have job openings and that's not exactly what you want to do, that probably would be a big picture way to learn the business, and to make connections and then to potentially segue to something on a show. I mean, you could also send cold letters to like the position of line producer on a show. If you read like the production charts, it'll list the line producers of each show, and you know, and I think it's reasonable to send out, you know, very like sort of, I would say not over the top, not too long, you know, a cover letter, just describing and that, you know, that you want to work hard and love to be a part of the show in any way you can. A PA, like a lot of times PAs will move into the writer's assistant positions. There's a little bit of a hierarchy there. So a cold letter to the line producer would be something. Reaching out to any connection that you have through friend of a friend and trying to get your resume into a show that's looking. There's a lot of stuff out there. It's like when we were starting out, it was really based on this kind of in May shows were picked up, network cycle, and now it's like seems like things are happening more randomly throughout the year. And so I think that's probably a good thing for the situation we're in now, where there's like a lot of little shows happening, and some of them are happening remote. You know, everything's happening remotely. Like there are things that could come up over the course of the year that maybe you can even do from home in some way. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that complicates things right now.
In a world, I would say to wrap that up. In a world, I think where you know, there's no big hits anymore. Everything is so bifurcated, and the audience, even for a network show, is, you know, 1/10 of what it used to be 10 years ago even. The good news, I think, for young people starting out in that respect is that there's so many outlets. There's so many things being made. There's a million shows that you probably have the same thing where people are like, did you see that? You know, this, and I've never heard of it. And it's their favorite show. That never used to happen. But I think that's good for people like you guys who are just starting out, because there's so many more opportunities because the world is so much bigger.
Right.
Yeah, but get a job. Try to get a job at an agency. No job is too small. You know, be a PA if you have to, and it's just the best way to meet people, because we cold letters are great, but I don't think we've ever hired anyone off a cold letter. You know,
well, yeah, I don't know.
It's always my assistant, or my assistant knows somebody, or, you know, that kind of thing.
The other thing is just like right now, while there's this crazy downtime, just working on you don't usually in life have these weird pockets of time where you have so much time at home, and so really like taking the time to write and get your stuff together. It's like at least there's that where you can really like try to advance your writing samples if you're a writer during this time.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have Autumn up next. Thanks, Cameron. And
I think she's signing on right now.
Okay. Maybe she's having problems. Not sure. Okay, she'll sign on. I'll ask the questions. You guys can start talking since there's a few others, and then she can pop on and we can see her face. Hi there. What advice would you give to writers wanting to dive into the daunting worlds of getting repped and staffed? How can we best present ourselves in a domain where we might not necessarily know people? And here's Autumn. I asked her question, so meet Autumn. Here we go.
Hi, Autumn.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, sorry. Thank you for, it booted me off the moment I think I got accepted. But yeah, thank you again for your time, and hope, answering my question, I suppose.
I think that it's definitely going to be like a referral from someone you know. So it's sort of like, I think the best path to getting an agent is to try to get those entry-level jobs as a PA, writer's assistant, or assistant to a producer, assistant to an actor, like any of those things, I think is the best path to getting an agent ultimately, because then you can get like a better referral than, I think writing agents cold letters is probably not the easiest way to go. I mean, when we're talking about not working with our agents right now, I don't know if everybody's up to speed on that, but the Writers Guild is in the middle of like a legal action against the agencies, and so they asked us all to fire our agents for the time being. And so there's kind of like it's a weird moment between writers and agents.
Especially the big, the big agencies. Smaller agencies are still working and still signing clients.
Yeah.
The big agencies that are not repping writers in the same way right now, and we're hoping it gets resolved. But that's what we're saying. But I don't think that's really helpful for this particular
Right.
time.
I would also say though that I don't think that agents are the only gatekeeper for writers to get work. A lot of people really end up getting their own jobs for the most part, and sometimes agents end up negotiating those deals. But you can get work through like your own devices, your friends, and in our career, like I think that like you always kind of have to be entrepreneurial and be like putting your own projects out there and looking for your own stuff. Like even like it's never stopped. Like we're like, when does it just stop and we can just rest on our laurels? It's like you always have to be aggressively pursuing your next thing throughout your whole career, it feels like. And so and your agent can be very helpful, but also a lot of it is up to you. And so I don't think that it's like the line of demarcation of like, if I have an agent, I can get work. If I don't, I can't.
I think that's right. And to second that point, like now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think any job we've gotten, or just when we were starting out, just the idea is like you have to get an agent. I know it's that catch-22 of you can't get a job without an agent, you can't get an agent without a job. I've heard that said before, and I think I felt that back in the day. But I would say that the reality is agents are not the most entrepreneurial. They need to see something before they're going to sign you. They need you to be doing something, whether you're a stand-up comedian or you've made a short film or you've made a web series or you've written a book or have a podcast. They need a tangible, they think very literally, how can I make money off of this person?
Mm-hmm.
They're not creative, champions necessarily. I mean, some are great. We love our agents. But at the end of the day, I think the key is for any job, really get a job in the business, get to know people if you don't know people. The idea of saying, well, I don't know anyone, is like, well, your job now is to get to know people then. Your job is to work in the mailroom at an agency or do something where you can start to spread your base of people that you know, who are your age, who are just starting out, just like you guys are. And something will come of that if your material is good, for sure. And then you'll get the agent.
I honestly love, I'm going to jump in for a second. I love that you guys are saying this because I say it to nauseam, and I think they'll listen to you guys more, which they should be, because you guys are the ones who are doing it day to day. But what I always suggest, and please let me know if you agree, a lot of the times at the levels that they're at, if they do have some things to sell or have a track record in some sort of sale or are staffable, but maybe haven't sold anything, look for a manager, because managers are able to produce with you. And I'm saying entry level, lower level, like see the ones that were just promoted that are a junior manager, that might have been a coordinator, that are looking to sign new, fresh talent, because they aren't going to be signing the established talent, but they are looking to grow with you, but they're working at a management company that most likely has the connections to hopefully get you in the right doors. Do you guys agree with that? That managers, because you're right, agents are 10%ers. They're about bottom line.
They're transactional, and
yes.
When we were young, we had a manager too. Exactly what you're saying. We signed with a manager, I think, before we had any agent. Maybe, or I'm not sure. We no longer have a manager. We haven't had a manager for probably 10 years, 15 years, something like that. But when we were starting out, you're right. It was an excellent tool, and our manager was fantastic. And she read the screenplay that I was talking about that we wrote at USC. She had read that and said, "I want to meet you guys." And then she was off hustling for us and did great things for our career.
And we were kind of, I mean, at the time we were like, do you really want a manager? That's 20%, that's 10% of our salary to an agent, 10% to a manager. And we were like, well, we're making nothing. So like 20% of nothing is okay. Like whoever is going to help us get the job, it was worth it to us in the beginning of our career. Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And Abel, we have Abel up next.
Hello?
Hey.
Hi there. Okay, so I was just going to ask, since there's dozens upon dozens of like people trying to get like writing jobs, and some even have like years of experience like under their belt already, what is it in your guys' opinion are like the tools / advantages that like us students have to like help us stand out amongst everything? Yeah.
You're talking about like as film students?
Yeah, as like us coming in, because I know like how you said like, okay, go through like, start out, you know, just go put in the hustle and the grind to like try and get what you have. But like, what do you think is something that we have or that we've learned over like our years here now that like is really going to like help us, or that we should really like kind of focus on to do? Is it just like what we've been learning? Is it like the amount of work we've done now? Like, what is it that really we should be kind of focusing our efforts on, so we don't kind of spread ourselves too thin, if any of that makes sense?
Well, I think if I'm answering their question, like I think like when we were starting out, I remember feeling like the numbers are so intimidating. Like there's stack. I mean, it was paper scripts, so it was like there's stacks of scripts in the office. How is ours possibly going to be seen? And it's kind of overwhelming. I would say like try not to focus. Like don't worry about the numbers. Like you can't, like it's a competitive field, but like you can't overwhelmingly focus on that point, because you just have to like work on your own thing and keep your head down and do your work, and don't say like, well, only like 1% of scripts are bought, and like just try not to focus too much on that. Because I think it's not helpful. You guys are coming from like the best film school in the country. You're already like having the USC degree already makes you seem more serious than other people. And I'm sure you've had a great education and, you know, an amazing training in what you've done so far. So I think it's just a little bit of like a confidence game of kind of ignoring the numbers and believing that you have something to offer, because there are a lot of scripts out there, but they're, like we were saying before, they're not all good. Most of them aren't. And so good things can stand out. And when I was in college, I remember I came down to LA and was listening to a writer speak about Hollywood. Like, how do you make it in Hollywood? Like, this always stayed with me. He was like, it really seems like Hollywood is like, there's this big wall and everyone on the other side of the wall is having a great time. And like, how do you possibly get over the wall? And he was like, it's really not that. It's like, it's more like you're just doing the work every day to just build a career. And it's not like you just one day catapult over the wall and that's it. It's like, you're just doing the work and you're just trying to, you know, make the connections, get in the system. It's like, it's unlike any other field, but in certain ways it's like other fields, because you just need to be serious and do the work and, you know, be someone that is, of, you know, an expert in their field and putting out good work and being a good employee. You know, in certain ways, it follows the pattern of other fields too.
I would say, yeah, just to add to that, I think that there's like two prongs of this. I think being a USC grad, really take advantage of all of your friends that you made at USC, all of the people, because I kind of think it's two things. I kind of think it's the hustle, getting that first job that gets you to start meeting people and start meeting agents' assistants and start meeting producers and young writers who are going to be the people who recommend you for whatever thing you're trying to get recommended for. And then the other side of it that USC really helped us with, and that hopefully helps you with, is once you get that break, once you get that, you know, showrunner to be reading your script, however you do it, or your movie in the hands of executives, your screenplay, you have to make sure it's good. Like, you have to have found your voice and you have to be constantly working on that. And that's the creative side of it, right? So it's like, on one hand, you need to do the hustle. USC is great at helping with that. All the internships, all the things, take any job you can get so that you're meeting people and out there. But also be sure that you're always thinking, what is my voice? What do I bring to the table specifically? A lot of times when we have pitched pilots, or when we've been in the, you know, hearing about how executives think, a lot of the way they think is, why is this person who's pitching me this uniquely qualified to tell this story at this time? And sometimes it's really not. Sometimes you have to make it up. Sometimes it's half true. Sometimes it's fully true. But you have to convince yourself, why am I the person to tell this story at this time? And how can what am I bringing to the table? You know, of course, we're all part of a system that is Hollywood, and you know, we've done jobs that have been executing rewrites on, you know, and just trying to get into the head of another writer or another world that's not coming from our absolute souls. But generally speaking, by the end of even those kind of jobs, you fall in love, and you think you're the only person that could have done this. And so I think just creatively speaking, find your voice and keep on working to find that. Write and write again until you find that thing that you think you're bringing that you don't read in every other spec script. That, you know, and reading other people's material is good. Reading material you love is good. You know, obviously what you've done in school, reading scripts, watching movies, studying them, figuring it out. We've got, you know, we learned a lot by just reading screenplays and reading. So I just think it's those two things. It's those two things. Take what you've learned in terms of finding your voice and take the connections that it's given you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And we have Celeste up next. Celeste, here she is. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this. This is awesome. I was wondering, I've been seeing a lot of things online about how, you know, the industry is sort of trying to crack down on what we can and cannot write to be filmed and actually produced during all of this, because they don't want to have other people contract COVID-19 and everything. I was wondering what your thoughts on that are, if you're starting to write things more in that light, or if you're still continuing to go towards how you usually write something.
And also, I want to jump in real quick, guys.
This is yes, ripped from the headlines and something we're dealing with right now with a show that we have a 10-episode order from Disney Plus. We wrote our scripts. We're almost done our scripts. We were filming our first episode in Vancouver in March. And we finished our first episode, but then everything shut down. We were able to post it remotely, doing our editing with our editors, but just on Zoom. And so now there's major questions with every corporation trying to figure, and the short answer headline to what you're saying is, we don't know, nobody knows. They literally the Walt Disney Company doesn't know what they're going to do and how they're going to handle it.
I mean, they all want to resume production, yes. and you can see them in Deadline Hollywood. Like, there's all these panels getting together to talk about, like, how could production resume safely, and it's complicated for everyone. So there's conversations there's a big safety panel with, you know, IATSE and DGA and SAG and all these people convening to put forward and talking with the producers about what could be conceivable for production. So you can read that list. You can find it out there. It was called the White Papers for some reason. I don't know why. And it's like a long discussion of how production could resume. And then all of the studios are having their own discussions about how production could resume. The DGA put up its own rules about, you know, how they could safely see a set running. And then the studios also have to negotiate with the unions to get, so there's basically all these permutations of concerns about how a set could safely run. And of course there's, like, you know, nobody knows how it will work in practice either, in terms of, and so we're literally going through that, and there's even a talk of, could special effects be used to put actors together in scenes because actors in a way it's the most risk to them because they can't work with masks on. And so they're really, so it's on the forefront of everyone's minds. Everyone's trying to figure out how it can resume safely. In terms of writing, I would say that, like, maybe if anybody is working on stuff, it might be an interesting exercise to work on a project that could be shot with just a few actors in a very outside in a field. I don't know, like it actually would not be a horrible script to think about putting together that would be like a more production safe kind of small scale project that could be made with a small crew in a small way, either to make on your own as a short film, or to you know, just have as a calling card of something that's more feasible production wise, as these are conversations on everyone's minds right now.
We haven't been told to address the pandemic in our show. And yet, we have been told to go back and look at big crowd scenes, look at cafeteria. We're doing a show about a high school, junior high, and a hockey team, and games and fans and sports and stunts, and it's not particularly COVID friendly. So we have been, tasked with, let's see if we can eliminate big crowds. Let's see if we can, but they're not saying, address COVID in a content way. So I don't think there's any right answer. It's a very confusing time. No one knows how long it's going to last. If you feel moved to, I think Cathy's right. Like, if you have a thought that could be done, and again, you guys have been on film school sets. I mean, imagine that times, several hundred to be on a real big Disney show set where there's hundreds of people. And you, having been up there in Vancouver, I'm just like, there's no way this could be done socially distanced. It seems impossible. But there are, what I was doing when I was your guys' age, it's like, yeah, you're running and gunning, you're doing what you can, and conceiving of things that are easy to shoot is always a good idea, even without COVID. Put a movie in a house, because that's always going to be. I kind of feel like in the movie world right now, and this is not television, it's movies, but in the movie world, and I'm not the first person to say this, but right now those mid-level movies are not getting made. It's either huge budget superhero movies or Blumhouse movies, and which are all these very small in a house or very contained little things. And especially for young people like yourselves, conceiving of something is not, there's no shame in conceiving of something that is production friendly. And if you look at all these movies that are made with Blumhouse or even Get Out or any of these movies, they're very contained. And that would be very COVID friendly, I think. So good way to think, I think. But not necessarily make it about COVID. We've had several conversations where people are like, what is the Zoom show about? And to us, that's super annoying. We don't feel like doing that. Maybe some of you do. Maybe some people do. That's not really our cup of tea right now. But thinking production friendly, good idea.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. And like, it's just been so weird looking at all of the headlines with everything happening. And obviously no one knows what's going on, but it's good to hear some perspective from real people instead of a trade. So
yeah, I would say play the long game and write what you're passionate about at the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. We have Dustin up next. Thanks, Celeste.
Dustin.
Cool. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, cool. All right. I can't see me, but that's okay. Oh. I figured it. Technology. Hi, guys. Thank you so much. My question is actually kind of surrounding this idea. I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place right now, where it's like, if you have a script, pushing it to people who could potentially read it and produce it and do all that good stuff, or just taking it and doing it yourself and pushing it through YouTube and developing a web series. So I guess my question is, what are the benefits to doing your own thing and getting it going on YouTube? And do showrunners take that success into consideration when looking at projects, or what kind of benefits does that have? Like, how would you guys treat that?
When we were just starting out, it was before, the web series was a big calling card for people, which, it certainly has become right now. So, as Cathy said, when we were starting on TV, there was a real season, and it was, you're staffed at this month of the year, very different now. So I would always say, being part of a machine and a system is great, but absolutely, as showrunners, when somebody says I did a web series and I did all these episodes and you can watch one, I always take it seriously and love it. I think it's a great calling card. And if you can do it yourself, you can control it and you can make what you want to make, that's fantastic. And there's such a lower entry, barrier to entry in terms of how expensive things are these days, that I think when starting out, creating product any way you can, as opposed to waiting for people to return your calls, is going to be that I would recommend that for sure. The thing about web series is most of the time when I click on the link that people send me or agents send me, it's awful. You know what I mean? Is the truth. Most web series are just sort of unwatchable to me, and I don't know, you know, it's just, there's not a lot of good stuff. You know, it's the same thing with scripts. When you read 100 scripts, you'll find a couple of good ones that really make you laugh and are emotional in a real way. But you know, that being aside, I think for sure that's a great way to go.
Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, maybe particularly for like what's happening right now, that production is not happening, and you know, just to feel that you can be creative and you can work with people, that you know, develop that kind of relationship with people where you're working together and being more active. I think that might be like sanity saving as well. So
yeah, go make your web series for sure.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. It sounds like your message is pretty much content will always trump everything else. So
yeah, have a voice, and if it sticks out because it's good, it'll be a great calling card for you.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have Jen up next.
I'm on. I'm live. Okay. Hi. Oh, okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Of course, you'd think I would have mastered Zoom by now. Thank you so much for talking to us. I had a question about if you have samples, if you have, you know, you feel like you have a handle on structure, but then you get an opportunity to meet with someone and it comes time to pitching that idea, that concept. Do you have any advice in terms of approaching that meeting and how to encapsulate and sell your idea and yourself at the same time?
Are you talking about for a TV show specifically, or a movie?
Yes, specifically for TV, but if I feel like the advice tends to bleed into any story really, but.
We start every pitch by talking about how it relates to us personally. So like starting sort of, it opens with like, or something that we've like,
or how we came up with the idea. Yeah, but as I said before, people are looking, you might not think so. You know, the cliche of Hollywood is executives just want these big flash bam ideas or superheroes or whatever. But really, executives, I'm not gonna say they want to seem like they're smart. They are smart. They often went to really good colleges, and they pride themselves, and it doesn't always end up so great. Sometimes it ends up great. Some TV shows are bad, some TV shows are good. But at the inception, really what hooks an executive is, you might not be able to say this is my story because it might not be your, like how I grew up and that, you know, this is personal, but really they really are looking for, why are you telling this story? What about you? Especially with TV, where it doesn't end with episode 1, it just starts with episode 1. You know, movies are a little different. They're a little more conceptually based, I think, because it's like the writer can go away after the script is done. Not true with TV. So I always feel like starting a pitch or starting a conversation about an idea is whether it's about you or why you're passionate about it or why it moves you or what you bring to the table in terms of a creative entity. They want to hook into you as much as they want to hook into the idea. And so that's how I think that's the best way to sell any idea.
So we usually start by telling some kind of like personal anecdote of how that then segues into you know, so we'll tell the story, and then so this got us thinking about this aspect, this theme, this thing. So what we want to do is a story about this character, and then maybe start talking about that character, and here, you know, and then you kind of can go from there, where it's like personal story, thematically what you're getting at. Start talking about the character, because when you're hearing about a character, I think you're a little more hooked in as a listener as opposed to just sort of global thematics. And then start telling like the big picture of the pilot, and then we end. So, and that would be kind of like running through all the characters, telling the story of the pilot. So sometimes it takes a lot of like rearranging. Is it best to tell the story of the pilot first and then get into all the characters, or you know, introduce things along the way? And then by the end, we're talking about like some ideas for future episodes, and then kind of like some conclusion where where you're saying like why this is exciting and meaningful to you and why you think it's like the kind of story that people would need right now. Right? I mean, isn't that the overall structure of most of our pitches?
Yes, for sure. And if you can get somebody laughing, you're more likely to get somebody laughing at a story you're telling, an awkward story about yourself or a friend or a relative, or you were put in this uncomfortable position that got you to this comedic idea that is this idea. You're more likely to engage than to say, this is about Bob. And Bob is a guy who does this, and this is why it's funny.
Right.
you just talk about it. I know it seems weird, but talking about yourself and talking about your experiences and why you want to tell this story is, I think, always the best way to start. It's about the who, not the what, and that's what ultimately TV really is driven, because every story is a different story every week. It's about the who. It's about the characters that people fall in love with.
Might be a little different for drama.
Yes.
But we
probably different for Homeland.
Yeah. The Homeland pitch lacked jokes, but
Homeland pitch was, no, even the Homeland pitch, I bet it was like Carrie Mathison. She's troubled. She has this past where she didn't feel like she caught 9/11 and it's driven her crazy and she's literally insane, but her insanity makes her great at her job. And, that's what sets that show apart, I think, from any given CIA story. That actress who plays it, I mean, so fantastic. So
isn't all of our insanity what makes us great at our job?
Exactly. Your
insanity, right?
Your greatest weakness is your greatest strength, and that's Carrie Mathison, right? So
I don't know. Maybe I could just speak for myself, or I
don't know. But yeah, that's how we sell everything.
That makes sense to start with yourself, and then ideally by the end of the pitch, you get global with it in terms of seeing the life of the show beyond the pilot, etc.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in with another question because we have a lot of questions, and then we're going to have one last panelist ask a question before we run out of time. But there's one question that popped up, a lot of the questions that came our way. So once you get your first meeting, either for being staffed or representation, or like once you get in the room, how do you best represent yourself? Like how do you feel is the best first impression? We're getting a lot of that questions. And then the second side of it is, how do you, obviously through contacts, but how do you get the opportunity to even get in the room? So I guess maybe the second part is the first part to answer. And then once you're there, what do you suggest they do? Because I think that's answering about 3 or 4 questions on here. And then Louisa will ask the last question.
Okay, I just cutting to the chase. I think like a key piece of advice on taking a meeting is complimenting the project you're meeting on quickly, because I don't know that we knew that like right off the bat. And so sometimes we'd have meetings and you just think you're having a chat, and then later on you're trying to get back to like, but I really like your show because blah blah blah. It's just like a good interview technique, I think, to come in and say like, God, I read your script and I really loved it because blah, 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 or think I could bring the, like getting that in quickly, I think is just strategically a good idea.
Your first instinct when you interview for any given job might be, I don't love this show, but this is a great opportunity and a great job. Like we all have our favorite shows, and then we all have a lot of stuff that we think is okay. I guarantee you that when you get on staff of something, you will, as I said, you fall in love with what you're doing. And there's so many creative, smart, interesting people involved in the best shows, the mediocre shows, and the worst shows. It's really, it's almost magic when something really works and catches on with an audience. But yeah, we learned the hard way. Never come in and critique a pilot.
Well, I don't know if we did that, but
well, we had a couple meetings where we were like, we would do this slightly differently. Because you think people want to hear your constructive ideas. They don't. They want to hear how great they are and how great their show is and what you can bring to the table. But I think that beyond that, be a fountain of enthusiasm. You're as young. Here's what you bring as young people. This is what showrunners have said to us when we were young, and what I've learned, like in the room. Be the first one there, be the last one to leave, have pads of ideas ready to go. If anyone asks you, you got to put in the work. I mean, we really, and I would say also once you get into a room, even if this show, the rare point when you get your first job is this is your absolute dream job that is coming from your soul. But the key, I think, is to try to figure out how to make the show yours. And I'll give a specific example. If you guys are familiar with The King of Queens, which is still like on in syndication, if you've watched it, we were baby writers on that show. And we came in and we were, and the pilot of that show was kind of like very blue collar and working class and big funny with Kevin James, but it was a little bit different than the way we were brought up as, you know, suburban Jewish kids in, you know, on the East Coast. It was just, we weren't necessarily coming from it from our soul watching the pilot. But what we decided was, for us, this show is going to be a romantic comedy. And that's what we were going to bring to the table. And the pilot had sort of couple-ish elements, romantic comedy elements, but we were like, what can Cathy and Josh, male-female writing team, we love writing romantic comedies, we love writing that kind of dialogue and those kind of dynamics. We're going to make this show about, for us, it's not going to be all it's about, but for us, what we're going to really specialize and hone in on is we're going to make this about the marriage and the romantic comedy of this show. And that's, every story we pitched was based on our lives, dynamics that we've had, funny things that happen to us in our relationship because we're married or with our friends. And so I would say, try to figure out a way in any show you're on, how are you going to make it about you? How are you going to make it, how are you going to tell stories that you can dig your teeth into emotionally, comedically, all that stuff. And that's really how you're going to make it a little bit your voice and bring a little bit your voice to a show, to whatever show it is.
But in terms of, but getting back to like taking a meeting and having a successful meeting for a show, I think that complimenting the show is just one very concrete piece of advice that I have. Another thing is just that, like, I would say generally speaking, I like most TV writers. Like, it's like, I'm sure there's people out there who wouldn't be my cup of tea or whatever, but like, I've really just liked that group of people in Hollywood. They're smart, they're nice, like, it's a good group. And so people want to know when you're coming in that you're not going to be disruptive to that vibe in a room. And so another thing in a meeting is just to kind of present yourself as someone who has ideas and energy and enthusiasm, but you're not going to dominate the room so much as like a baby writer that it's going to stop the room or make it hard for the showrunner to kind of think through what needs to happen. That you're still going to be like that person who's going to be on their team and really helping them do what they want to do.
Also, don't pitch cuts. Don't pitch. They did this on another show that I saw. Like, these are things when you're in the room. Little rules we learned. You know, just be creative, pitch funny, interesting ideas that are helpful and that push the ball forward. As a writer, yeah. I mean, how to get a job?
Think of other
hard to know.
Yeah, I mean, coming in with some ideas. So sometimes we get to them in meetings, and so I'm going to shut that window. Sometimes we do try to like prepare. We did always try to prepare for television writer meetings with ideas for shows, but we didn't always get to them in meetings. But we did try to have like those kind of thoughts in mind of what could be future episodes of any given show.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. That was super helpful, and I know we answered several questions at once. So we have our last panelist. Hello. Can't hear you.
Hi.
Hey. Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure. It's been a great time.
Great. Who are some writers that have inspired you?
We can't hear you, so
we heard her.
I think the audio
can
cut
ask
out
the question because
on
see
yours.
it. We
Can you
can't
hear
hear you. There you go. I think you're there. Talk again. There you go.
Who are some writers who inspired you and why?
So many.
We love James L. Brooks. We love the movie. If anyone has seen the Broadcast News, it's just like, I just think the writing in that is so exciting. And we love Nora Ephron. When Harry Met Sally was just so formative to us at the right age, I guess. But I just loved her dialogue. What else?
I mean, and to the James L. Brooks point, here's a guy who created the Mary Tyler Moore, like the beginnings of television. He created all of these incredibly great comedies of the 70s, and then went on to write and direct all of these amazing movies. And then he was the guy who brought The Simpsons to television. So he's had an incredible career.
I'll also say, and I think this is true for a lot of comedy writers, at least in our age group, Barry Levinson's Diner is just the greatest dialogue. I mean, I think that like, I guess there's just an age, like when you're in your teens and 20s, just there's an age where a style of writing just locks in and inspires you, and it locks in at that age in your life.
For sure. I mean, for sure. Yeah, we talk about the movies that we grew up with. John Hughes, huge influence on us. Ivan Reitman and Harold Ramis, and you know, who created all of those comedies that I grew up with and loved. Those were really inspiring. Really inspiring. I mean, they're the best comedies, you know, in my mind, because that's when I was learning all about movies and all about TV and all about how it all works. So, Babalu Lowell Gans and Babalu Mandel, we are these writers who wrote City Slickers and Parenthood and like tons of movies, Splash.
We saw them speak at.
Yeah, exactly. We one of our favorite things. They came to speak at USC, and we were so enamored with all of their material and meeting them that we literally stole a water bottle that one of them was drinking. We were like, "There's something in the water to make them funny. We're gonna keep that."
Nowadays, you wouldn't.
Yeah,
do
it would be
that.
like if he ever knew that, they would. The most disturbing thing we've ever done.
In the COVID era, you would like.
Oh yeah, not in the COVID era.
From the water
yeah, and I think that those are the comedy writers that we look to and that we keep rereading. But I would say also we were both theater kids, and I was a drama major in college, and I loved Neil Simon and David Mamet and these people who I went through a lot of phases as a writer before I just figured out how to just write. And it was like for a year I just imitated David Mamet. I don't know if any of you have read any David Mamet plays or seen them, but it's just really a very specific way of writing, and like anything you can do to just get into an author or a playwright or whatever, you know, it's great. It's great. And now, you know, as we continue to work, there's all new writer, Judd Apatow, and you know, those kind of, you know, just whatever. There's so many great writers, but those were our influences early on.
Great, thank you.
I love ending these talks on a personal question because it just truly brings out enthusiasm in our guest speakers, because it's passion and it comes from, you know, a place of what inspired you to become as successful in who you are today. So I want to end the talk by asking, is there anything we forgot to cover or any wonderful wisdom, advice, topics, tips that you would love to inspire everyone with today? And no pressure if there's not, because I know we covered a lot. We're just so incredibly grateful you both were here today and cannot thank you enough.
I don't know that there's anything we haven't covered. I'm sure there are a million things, but I would say for just starting out, Cathy touched on this earlier, but you know, USC is a phenomenal place and gave us a lot in our careers. And we are very, very grateful to our friends that we met there, that we still, you know, love and hang out with and work with each other. Who, you know, this is where this creative partnership started. And you know, Hollywood seems scary and it seems impenetrable sometimes, but it really, USC is a huge step up in that, and just finding your voice and finding your passion, finding out what you want to say and all the different ways that you can say it creatively. Just stick to that and don't worry about the rest. Things fall into place. If you just really focus on that and really focus on having fun, being part of, it's a fantastic, fun business and a wonderful life if you can do it.
Right. And I would say, there's one other sort of concrete tip, which is that the Writers Guild, I think, has a program where, I'm not quite sure what the parameters are right now, but a few years ago, it was to try to give women and diverse writers an entry into writers' rooms, and where the Writers Guild would make a writer if you could get in this program, and you could figure it out from if it still exists and what the rules are from the Writers Guild website, but where the Writers Guild would pay to the salary of a staff writer for 6 weeks, so that that person who is a diverse writer or a female writer to try to get those people on staff at no cost to the show, and give them an opportunity to, at that, after 6 weeks, the show would have to take on their salary, but it was like a
foot in the door.
A foot in the door. And we hired someone through that program, and now he has like a huge.
He's big time now. He's great.
He's fantastic, and
Yeah.
so that's another just like mini tip on that. Just a little, like one other access point. But yeah, I mean, I agree that like it's not like a magical thing that you have to have this big break and then everything is set. It's about like hard work, being someone people want to work with, coming up with good ideas, and just really like, especially when you're young, before you have like, more life responsibilities, really just giving it your all in any job that you have to try to be indispensable to that job.
There's no magic to it. I mean, we don't come from Hollywood people. We didn't grow up in LA. We knew nobody in the entertainment business, and our parents were, teachers and doctors and just normal, and so we kind of approached it a little bit like that. It's just, it's a great job, but it's a job, and you got to work harder than the next person, and you got to, be better at it than the next person. And so just put in the work, figure out what's special about you and what you bring to the table. And I think that's true for probably any career, to really rise up and be great at it. And if you do that, that's all you can do. That's the best you can do. And, you're Trojans, you're USC film grads, come on. It's gonna be great.
Cathy and Josh, I cannot thank you enough for being here today. This was incredibly helpful. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, or their questions weren't answered, you can email me and I'll make sure to get them answered for you. And if you're not in First Jobs already, which hopefully you are, please join, because we have lots of wonderful opportunities, staffing opportunities, as most of you know. And I wish you both a beautiful rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again for your time. Thank you all. And
see you around the bend. We'll be asking all you for jobs in about 3 years. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Take care.